So a higher option part on the accounts, look, current assets, they're like your stock, your money in your bank, your debtors, your customers who owe you money, right? And you're looking at it from 1 year to the other. So you're popping from 96 to 97 where you can see your current assets improving. But also your current liabilities are going up. That's the money you owe out within the year. So that's like your bank overdraft or your creditors or your expenses due. So money owed that has to be paid within the year. And then they show the closing stock separate because for certain ratios you need to see it separate. So that's your closing stock 1996, 97. So equity share capital, it belongs to the shareholders, the ordinary shareholders, and long-term debt. These are for your debt equity ratios mentioned earlier, and then retained earnings as savings belongs to the owners. Sometimes we call it reserves. So look down here, you'll have formula questions, and you have to look over that and look over the videos on that as well. But here you have the working capital ratios. So the asset test ratio, the working capital ratio, the asset test ratio, and the debt equity ratio. They just want you to calculate ratios, so knowing them is important and practicing them. Applying your knowledge, comment on 2 trends that you notice developing in the business, suggest what you would do about them. So using these 2 formulas, you have to talk about the trend. So let's calculate the formulas. There's the ratio of the working capital rate. It's just current assets is to current liabilities. So your current assets is 91,000 and your current liabilities is 62,400. You have to get it down to a ratio is to 1. So you just divide them, you get 1.57, and that means is to 1. So your current assets is nearly 1.5 times your current liabilities. And you do it for the first year, 1996. So you could see that your current assets were nearly 1.9. So nearly 2 times. So the year before, you had a much better situation. Your current assets were nearly double. And that's what you talk about with the trend. Your current asset ratio, working capital ratio has decreased, which means you're in a less favourable position to pay your short-term debts. We'll talk about that in a minute. Asset test ratio is practically identical to the working capital, but they have your current assets, but you need to exclude your closing stock. Take away your closing stock, divided by your current liabilities. So you do that sum first, and in your head you can see that basically you're left with 42,500 divided by 62,400. So you're 0.681. The idea for this is 1:1. All right. And then down here, the year before, you were nearly 1:1. All right. So you're just calculating ratios. That's part I, easy marks. And then the debt equity is what it says it is. Long-term debt, which the money that belongs to your shareholders, equity share and retained earnings. So you add them 2 together. And in 1997, it's 0.94:1, whereas the year before, your debt was only 0.45, half of your equity, less than half your equity. So commons, liquidity here has gone from being your liquidity, has disimproved. That's your working capital ratio. So your liquidity has disimproved, your ability to pay your short-term debts. So it was 1.86, gone down to 1.5:1. This is well below the ideal. So mention what's happening over time and what the ideal is. And the ideal for working capital is 2:1. The asset test ratio was nearly 1:1, but then it decreased to approximately 0.7:1. This is well below the ideal. The firm could introduce just-in-time stock system so that they don't have a lot of money caught up. So just-in-time means you only buy the stock in as it's ordered. And therefore you don't have a lot of stock on your premises and a lot of cash held up in the stock. And it could also introduce stricter credit control. So when you're talking about your current asset ratios and your asset test ratios, you're trying to talk about how can you get money in quicker and cash in quicker. So stricter credit control and get your money in, and then just-in-time stock as well, not to have a lot of cash held up in your stock. The gearing position has got to do with your debt equity. Has moved from a low position of nearly half in 1996 to almost 1:1 in 97. This is because they received a long-term loan of 133 in 1997, because you went from 253 in your debt, whereas you only were 120. This means higher interest, and the firm could issue more shares or plough back more profits into the company, try and don't give out as much dividend. So how can you get your equity higher? 2 things: your equity ratio. You need to either issue more shares to have more people invested, so you've got a better share equity ratio, or you don't give out as much dividend next year to keep your profits in. and you try or any profits to pay back your loan as quick as you can. So use the structure, formula, figures, answer, comment. All right. So when you're talking about this section, formula, figures, answer, and comment on the trends and the ideals. And here's another example. We have long-term loans, again, ordinary share capital, reserves, overdrafts. All right. And it's only a short question. Debt equity ratio. So it's about knowing what makes up debt and what makes up equity. So your debt, your long-term debt, that's it there, just in one month, 310. Your equity is made up of two figures, your share capital and your reserves. All right. So there you can see the formula. So you should write the formula. Debt is to equity. That's it there. And then for it is your long-term 310, and that's your equity, ordinary shares plus reserves. And so that was in 2000 and 1999. So your debt was 1.5 times your equity, whereas in 2000 it's only 1:1. So that's improved. So that's your comment. So you talk about down here your comment. In 1999, the firm was highly geared, but it moved to a neutral gearing position, 1:1 in 2000. This means the firm is funded equally by outsiders, debt, long-term loans, and owners. The change was caused by issuing more shares and by retaining more earnings. And you see that by up here. How did it improve? Well, look, the loan went down. The loan went up only by a small amount, so it's not really worth commenting on. Whereas this went up by a good amount, your ordinary shares, and then the reserves, they kept loads of savings. So you look, and that's how you comment. Okay, so that's your solution on that section there. Okay.